The blood-red sun cast long shadows across Lovelock, Nevada, as Willow Hayes ran for her life, the hem of her dusty dress clutched in white-knuckled hands, her lungs burning with every desperate breath. Behind her, she could hear the thundering hoofbeats of Victor Blackburn's stallion, a sound that had haunted her nightmares for months. It was 1878, and Willow had escaped the man who claimed to own her heart, soul, and future, a claim made with fists and threats rather than love. 3 days of freedom was all she'd managed before he'd tracked her to this dusty frontier town, his face twisted with a rage that promised retribution. "You can run, Willow, but you belong to me." Victor's voice carried on the wind as she ducked between buildings, searching frantically for anywhere to hide. The general store's back entrance stood ajar, and Willow slipped inside, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The shopkeeper, a kindly older woman, looked up in surprise. "Please," Willow whispered, tears streaming down her dirt-smudged face. "There's a man after me. He'll kill me if he finds me." The woman's weathered face softened with understanding. Without a word, she gestured toward a storeroom behind the counter. "In there, child. Stay quiet." Willow had barely concealed herself behind stacks of flour sacks when the store's front door burst open, bell jangling violently. Through a crack between the crates, she could see Victor's imposing silhouette, his hand resting on the gun at his hip. "I'm looking for a woman," he drawled, his voice deceptively calm. "Pretty little thing with auburn hair, my fiancé. She's unwell, ran off in a state of confusion." The shopkeeper's face revealed nothing. "Haven't seen anyone like that today." Victor leaned across the counter, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I don't believe you." The shop bell jangled again, and Willow's heart nearly stopped as a tall figure filled the doorway. Broad-shouldered and sun-bronzed, the newcomer carried himself with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to the harsh realities of the frontier. His eyes, clear and piercing as a mountain lake, surveyed the scene with quiet intensity. "Problem here?" the stranger asked, his voice low and steady. Victor straightened, sizing up the man whose hand hovered near the holster on his hip. "No problem. Just looking for my woman." "Mrs. Peterson asked me to bring these supplies," the cowboy said, addressing the shopkeeper while keeping Victor in his peripheral vision. "Everything all right, madam?" "Just fine, Mr. Walker," she replied, a silent message passing between them. This gentleman was just leaving. Victor's jaw tightened, but something in the newcomer's stance made him reconsider whatever he'd planned. "I'll be in town for a while," he announced, his gaze sweeping the store one last time. "If you see her, let her know Victor's waiting." The air seemed to lighten when he finally stormed out, the door slamming behind him. Willow remained frozen in her hiding place, afraid to breathe. "You can come out now, miss," the cowboy called softly. "He's gone for the moment." Trembling, Willow emerged from the storeroom, her wide green eyes meeting the steady gaze of her unexpected savior. "Mason Walker," he introduced himself, tipping his hat slightly. "Looks like you could use some help." "Willow Hayes," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "And yes, I believe I could." Mrs. Peterson bustled around the counter. "That man's been asking all over town about you since midday, had a mean look about him." "He'll not stop looking," Willow said, wringing her hands. "Victor doesn't give up what he considers his." Mason studied her for a moment, taking in the fading bruise near her temple that her loosened hair couldn't quite hide. His expression hardened. "You got somewhere safe to stay?" When she shook her head, Mrs. Peterson clicked her tongue. "The boarding house is too obvious. He'll check there first." "My ranch is about 3 miles outside town," Mason offered after a moment's consideration. "You'd be welcome there until we figure something out." Willow hesitated, years of hard-learned caution warring with desperate need. "Why would you help a stranger?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Because my mother raised me to believe that a man who lays his hands on a woman in anger isn't much of a man at all." His eyes flicked to her bruised face. "And it seems to me you've had enough of that kind." Something in his straightforward decency broke through Willow's defenses, and tears welled in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "We'll need to be careful leaving town," Mason said. "All business now. Mrs. Peterson, could you find the lady a shawl, something to cover her hair?" As the shopkeeper hurried to comply, Mason moved to the window, scanning the street with practiced eyes. "He's at the saloon now, but his horse is hitched outside. We won't have long." Willow donned the offered shawl, pulling it forward to shadow her face. Her hands trembled as she tied it, and Mason's larger ones steadied hers for just a moment, a brief touch that somehow conveyed both strength and gentleness. "My wagon's around back," he said. "Stay low and follow me. If anyone asks, you're my cousin come to help with housekeeping." The next few minutes passed in a blur of tension as they slipped out the back door and into Mason's waiting wagon. Willow huddled down among sacks of grain and supplies, her heart racing each time they passed another soul on the road out of town. They were nearly at the town limits when a shout rang out behind them. "Walker, hold up there." Mason pulled the wagon to a controlled stop, his face betraying nothing as the town's sheriff rode up alongside them. Willow pressed herself lower among the supplies, scarcely daring to breathe. "Afternoon, Sheriff Bailey," Mason greeted casually. "Something I can help you with?" The sheriff eyed the wagon's contents suspiciously. "Got word there's a woman causing trouble in town. Eastern fellow's looking for her, says she stole from him before running off." "That's so," Mason replied, his expression giving away nothing. "Haven't seen any strangers about, except that fancy-dressed fellow at the saloon. Seemed more interested in his whiskey than lost property when I passed by." Sheriff Bailey studied Mason's face for a long moment. "You heading back to your place now?" "Yes, sir." "Got supplies to last me through the month. Mind if I take a look at your cargo? Just being thorough." Willow's breath caught in her throat, her fingers digging into the rough burlap beneath her. She could hear Mason shifting on the wagon seat above her. "Sheriff," Mason said quietly, "I've known you 5 years now. Have I ever given you reason to doubt my word?" A long pause followed, and Willow could almost feel the weight of the sheriff's consideration. "No," the older man finally admitted. "Can't say that you have." He sighed heavily. "That man's offering good money for information, though. Got half the town keeping an eye out." "Then I wish him luck finding whatever he's lost," Mason replied evenly. "Now, if there's nothing else, I'd like to get home before dark." After another moment's hesitation, the sheriff nodded. "Watch yourself, Walker. Something about that Easterner doesn't sit right with me." "I always do, Sheriff. Good day to you." Willow remained hidden until the sounds of the sheriff's horse had faded completely. Only then did she dare to sit up, her legs cramped and her nerves frayed. "Thank you," she said, voice ragged with emotion. "You didn't have to lie for me." Mason flicked the reins, urging his horses to a faster pace. "Wasn't entirely a lie. You didn't steal from him, did you?" "Only myself," she answered softly. The road stretched before them, winding through sage-dotted hills that gradually gave way to more fertile land as they approached Mason's ranch. The property wasn't large by Nevada standards, but it was well kept, a modest 2-story house with a barn and corral, surrounded by enough grazing land to support the small herd of cattle Willow could see in the distance. "It's not much," Mason said as he helped her down from the wagon, his hand strong and steady around hers. "But it's peaceful." "It's beautiful," Willow responded honestly, taking in the simple homestead with appreciation. After Philadelphia's crowded streets, and then the suffocating control of Victor's protection. The open space and quiet felt like freedom itself. Mason led her into the house, apologizing for its simplicity. "Been a bachelor establishment since I built it 3 years ago," he explained, setting her small bag down in the front room. "Bedroom upstairs is yours. I'll take the bunkhouse out back with my ranch hand, Emmett." The interior was plain but clean, with sturdy furniture and a few unexpected touches. Bookshelves lined one wall, and a landscape painting brightened another. A woman's shawl hung by the door, its pattern faded but still beautiful. "My mother's," Mason explained, following her gaze. "She passed before I moved west, but I couldn't leave it behind." Willow touched the fabric gently. "She'd be proud of the man you've become." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, an understanding, perhaps, or a recognition of kindred spirits. Mason looked away first, clearing his throat. "You must be hungry. Let me show you the kitchen." Over a simple meal of beans, cornbread, and surprisingly good coffee, Willow hesitantly began to share her story. Mason listened without interruption, his face revealing little beyond attentive concern. "I met Victor in Philadelphia," she explained, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her cup. "My father died last year, leaving nothing but debts. I was working as a seamstress when Victor began courting me, bringing gifts, complimenting my work, promising security." Her voice faltered. "He was charming at first, talked about marriage, about building a life together. But once I was dependent on him, living in his house as his intended, everything changed." Mason's hands tightened around his coffee cup, but he remained silent, letting her continue at her own pace. "The first time he struck me, he wept afterward, swore it would never happen again. I believed him." Willow's smile was bitter. "By the third time there were no more apologies, only explanations of how I had provoked him, and then the locks on the doors. 'For my protection,' he said." "How did you get away?" Mason asked quietly. "His housekeeper helped me. Her daughter had. She didn't survive a man like Victor." Willow looked up, her green eyes bright with unshed tears. "She gave me money she'd saved and helped me slip away while he was at his club. I took the train as far west as I could, working in small towns along the way. I thought I'd finally gone far enough that he couldn't find me." "Men like that," Mason said, his voice low with controlled anger, "they don't see women as people. They see possessions." "And he spent a fortune acquiring me," Willow agreed. "He won't leave without what he considers his property." Mason stood, gathering their plates. "Then we'll just have to make sure he does." His voice held a quiet certainty that, despite everything, made Willow feel safer than she had in months. That night, lying in a borrowed nightgown in the unfamiliar bedroom, Willow listened to the unfamiliar sounds of the Nevada night, the distant lowing of cattle, the whisper of wind through sage, the occasional call of a night bird. So different from Philadelphia's ceaseless noise or the oppressive silence of Victor's mansion. She knew she shouldn't stay long. Mason had already risked enough helping her, and Victor's reach was longer than she'd imagined. Yet for the first time since her father's death, she felt something dangerously close to hope stirring in her heart. Dawn arrived with golden light streaming through curtainless windows, and the smell of coffee wafting up from below. Willow dressed quickly in her one spare dress, faded blue calico, that had once been quite fashionable in Philadelphia, but now marked her as an Easterner as clearly as her accent. Mason was at the stove when she entered the kitchen, his back to her, as he turned bacon in a cast iron pan. He'd already been out to the barn, judging by his damp hair and fresh shirt. "Good morning," she said softly. He turned, and the smile that briefly crossed his face sent an unexpected warmth through her. "Morning. Sleep well." Better than I expected, she admitted, accepting the cup of coffee he offered. I've gotten used to looking over my shoulder. You're safe here, he assured her, setting a plate of eggs and bacon before her. Emmett and I will make sure of it. As if summoned by his name, the door opened and a lanky young man entered, removing his hat as he spotted Willow. "Madam," he greeted, nodding respectfully. "Emmett Jones. Mason's filled me in." "Thank you for allowing me to impose," Willow said, suddenly self-conscious of her situation. Emmett's open, freckled face broke into a grin. "Ain't no imposition to do right by someone in trouble. Sides, it'll be nice having someone around who can probably cook better than the boss here." Mason snorted, shoving a plate toward his ranch hand. "My cooking keeps us alive." "Barely," Emmett Stage whispered to Willow, who couldn't help but smile at their easy camaraderie. The morning passed in a flurry of activity as Mason and Emmett attended to the ranch's needs. Willow, unwilling to remain idle, took it upon herself to bring some order to the bachelor household. She swept floors, washed dishes that had clearly been only cursorily cleaned for some time, and discovered a neglected vegetable garden that might, with some care, produce something worthwhile. She was weeding the garden, her sleeves rolled up and a borrowed hat protecting her fair skin from the Nevada sun, when Mason returned from checking the herd. "You don't have to do that," he said, dismounting smoothly from his chestnut gelding. Willow sat back on her heels, pushing a strand of hair from her face. "I want to be useful. You've taken me in at considerable risk. It's the least I can do." Mason's eyes softened as he looked at her, dirt-smudged and determined. "You know, most Eastern ladies would be complaining about the heat and the dust, not taking on a garden that's been neglected for months." "I'm not most Eastern ladies," she replied with a small smile, "and I was raised to earn my keep." Something in her statement seemed to please him. "Looks like you've made good progress already. There might be hope for those tomatoes yet." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of an approaching wagon. Instantly alert, Mason turned toward the road, his hand moving instinctively toward his holster. "Stay behind me," he ordered quietly, all warmth vanishing from his voice. Willow stood, heart racing, until she recognized Mrs. Peterson from the general store sitting beside a man driving the wagon. "It's all right," she breathed. "I know her." The wagon pulled up to the house and Mrs. Peterson waved cheerfully. "Brought some things for your guest, Mr. Walker, and my husband wanted to meet the lady who's got the whole town buzzing." As they approached, Mr. Peterson tipped his hat respectfully. "Frank Peterson, madam." Didn't seem right letting Martha make this trip alone, what with that Easterner still asking questions all over town. "Is he still there?" Willow asked, unable to keep the tremor from her voice. Martha Peterson nodded grimly. "Offering rewards for information now. Says you're his fiancé, suffering from nervous exhaustion. Claims you need special care back east. He's been to every business in town," Frank added. "Even stopped the stagecoach yesterday checking passengers." Mason's jaw tightened. "He's persistent, I'll give him that." "Obsessed is more like it," Martha corrected, lifting a bundle from the wagon. "Brought some things you might need, dear. Can't have you wearing the same dress every day." Overwhelmed by the unexpected kindness, Willow accepted the package. "I can't possibly repay." "Nonsense," Martha interrupted briskly. "Any man who puts bruises on a woman like the ones I glimpsed on you deserves no consideration. Besides, these are just some things my daughters have outgrown. Better they're used than sitting in a trunk." Inside the bundle, Willow found 2 serviceable dresses, a nightgown, undergarments, and even a pair of sturdy boots that looked like they might actually fit her. "The whole town's talking," Frank continued, accepting a cup of coffee from Mason as they all moved to the shade of the porch. Most folks are minding their business, but money talks. Won't be long before someone points him this way. Let them, Mason said, his voice quiet but firm. I'll be ready. Frank and Martha exchanged a look. We thought you might say that, Martha said, reaching into her basket. Which is why I brought these. She pulled out a small bundle of papers, handing them to Willow. Marriage license forms, already have the witness signatures from me and Frank. Willow stared at the papers in confusion. I don't understand. It's simple, dear, Martha explained. If you and Mason were to marry, you'd be legally under his protection. Your fiancé would have no claim on you. It would be on paper only, Mason quickly added, seeing Willow's wide-eyed shock. But Frank's right, it would give you legal protection that simply hiding here won't provide. Willow's mind reeled at the suggestion. A marriage of convenience to a man she'd known barely a day. And yet, what choice did she have? Victor wouldn't stop. He'd track her across the country if needed, dragging her back to a life that had nearly broken her once already. You don't have to decide now, Mason said gently, seeing her internal struggle. It's just an option to consider. After the Petersons departed, promising to return in 2 days with news from town, Willow retreated to the garden, needing physical labor to process her tumultuous thoughts. The rhythm of pulling weeds and turning soil helped calm her racing mind, even as the Nevada sun beat down relentlessly. She was so absorbed in her work that she didn't notice Mason's approach until his shadow fell across the freshly turned earth. You'll burn if you stay out much longer, he said, offering a dipper of water from the well. Willow accepted it gratefully, the cool water soothing her parched throat. Thank you. For the water or the marriage proposal? The corner of his mouth quirked upward in a half-smile that softened the tension between them. Despite everything, Willow found herself smiling back. That was hardly a proposal, Mr. Walker, more of a business arrangement. Mason, he corrected. If we're discussing matrimony, you might as well use my given name. She studied him openly for the first time since their meeting, the strong, sun-browned features, the clear blue eyes that seemed to see more than most, the quiet confidence that never crossed into arrogance. Not handsome in the polished way Victor was, but striking in a more elemental way. Why would you do this? She asked finally. Marry a stranger, risk a dangerous man's wrath, all for someone you just met. Mason considered his answer carefully, looking out over his land as he gathered his thoughts. When I came west, I was running too, he finally said. Not from a person, but from grief. My parents died within months of each other. I had nothing left in Massachusetts but memories. He paused, seeming to weigh how much to share. Out here, strangers helped me when they had no reason to. Taught me ranching, gave me work, showed me how to survive in a land that kills the unprepared. I swore I'd pay that forward when I could. His eyes met hers, clear and direct. I'm not offering charity, Willow. Your strong, resourceful, and determined qualities that matter out here more than any Eastern notions of gentility. As my wife, even just on paper, you'd have a legitimate place here, and I could use someone with your skills and spirit. And if Victor comes anyway, Mason's expression hardened, then he'll find me standing between you and him. I promise you this, no one touches you without your permission. Not while I draw breath. The fierce protectiveness in his voice should have frightened her, reminding her too much of Victor's possessive claims. Instead, it warmed something long cold inside her because, unlike Victor's controlling rage, Mason's protection came with no strings, no demands, just a simple human decency that asked nothing in return. I'll need time to think, she said softly. He nodded, respecting her hesitation. Take all the time you need. The offer stands. That evening, after a simple supper that Willow insisted on preparing, If I'm to consider being the lady of this house, I should at least see if I can improve on your bachelor cooking, she'd teased. They sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the western sky in spectacular oranges and purples. "It's never this colorful back east," Willow observed, her voice tinged with wonder. "Too many buildings, too much smoke," Mason replied. "Out here, there's nothing between you and the sky." The peaceful moment was shattered by the distant sound of approaching riders, multiple horses, moving fast. Mason was on his feet instantly, his hand going to the revolver at his hip. "Get inside," he ordered, his voice no longer the gentle rumble she'd grown accustomed to. "Stay away from the windows." Willow hurried inside, her heart hammering as she watched Mason stride toward the barn where Emmett was emerging, rifle in hand. The two men exchanged brief words before positioning themselves strategically, Mason by the corral, partially shielded by the fence, Emmett at the corner of the barn. Through the curtained window, Willow could make out 3 riders approaching at a gallop, dust billowing behind them. Her breath caught as she recognized the lead rider, Victor. His city clothes exchanged for riding gear, but his imperious posture unmistakable even at a distance. The riders pulled up about 20 yards from where Mason stood, seemingly relaxed but alert, his hand resting casually near his holster. "Evening, gentlemen," she heard Mason call. "Something I can help you with." Victor dismounted, flanked by 2 rough-looking men who remained on horseback. Even from a distance, Willow could sense his barely contained rage. "I believe you're harboring my fiancé," Victor announced, his cultured Eastern accent incongruous in the frontier setting. "Willow Hayes. She's unwell and I've come to take her home." "No fiancé here," Mason replied easily. "Just me and my ranch hand." Victor's laugh held no humor. "Come now, Mr. Walker. Half the town knows you left with a woman matching her description. I'm offering a significant reward for her safe return, $500, a small fortune for a modest rancher such as yourself." "Not interested in your money," Mason said, his stance subtly shifting. "And I'd suggest you and your friends move along. Sun's setting and it's dangerous country at night for those who don't know it." Victor's voice hardened. "I'm not leaving without her. She belongs with me." "Women don't belong to anyone," Mason countered, his tone still conversational though his body had tensed. "Not in this territory." One of Victor's companions shifted impatiently. "Let's just search the place, Blackburn. Waste of time talking." Willow saw Mason's hand drop casually to rest on his holster. "That would be trespassing, and I don't take kindly to trespassers." Victor studied Mason for a long moment, clearly weighing his options. "I understand you're merely being chivalrous, Walker, protecting a woman who appeared to be in distress. But Willow is delicate, prone to flights of fancy and exaggeration. Whatever she's told you about our relationship is colored by her condition." "Only condition I observed was bruises that no lady should wear," Mason replied, his voice hardening. "Now, I'll say this one more time, turn around and ride out." Victor's face contorted with rage, the charming mask slipping to reveal the man Willow knew lurked beneath. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. I have connections across this country. One telegram, and your little ranch could burn to the ground with you in it." "Out here," Mason said quietly, "threats like that get men killed." The tension stretched between them, thick as summer lightning. Willow hardly dared breathe, knowing how quickly Victor's rage could turn to violence. She'd seen him destroy men's reputations, businesses, even lives with his influence and money. What would stop him from doing the same to Mason? The standoff was broken by the sound of another approaching rider, Sheriff Bailey, his badge glinting in the fading light as he pulled his horse to a stop between the two groups. "Heard we might have trouble out this way," he said, nodding to Mason before turning to Victor. "Mr. Blackburn, thought we discussed this. No vigilante searches." "Sheriff, I've been more than patient," Victor replied, his voice once again controlled and reasonable. "This man is hiding my fiancé, who is in need of medical attention. I'm simply trying to bring her home safely." Sheriff Bailey dismounted slowly, his weathered face revealing nothing. "Mr. Blackburn, I've known Mason Walker for 5 years. He's a man of his word and a respected rancher in these parts. If he says your lady isn't here, then that's good enough for me." Victor's face darkened. "And my word counts for nothing. I've shown you our engagement announcement. Letters from her physician, papers can be forged," the sheriff interrupted mildly. "And I've yet to hear the lady's side of things." He turned to Mason. "Walker, you said you haven't seen any strange women around." Mason met the sheriff's gaze steadily. "What I said, Sheriff, is that there's no one named Willow Hayes here." Something passed between the two men, an understanding that Willow couldn't quite decipher from her vantage point. After a long moment, Sheriff Bailey nodded slightly. "Mr. Blackburn, I suggest you and your companions return to town," he said firmly. "It'll be dark soon, and the trail's treacherous for those who don't know it. If the lady you're looking for is in my jurisdiction, I'll handle it according to the law." Victor's jaw worked as he struggled with his fury. "This isn't over," he finally said, his gaze fixed on Mason. "Not by a long shot." "Good evening to you too, sir," Mason replied evenly, not moving from his position. The 3 men remounted and turned their horses, Victor's rigid back radiating anger as they rode away. Sheriff Bailey remained behind, speaking quietly with Mason for several minutes before tipping his hat and following the others at a more leisurely pace. Only when the dust had settled, and the riders were tiny specks in the distance, did Mason finally come inside, his face grim but composed as he found Willow trembling in the kitchen. "You're safe," he assured her, keeping a respectful distance despite clearly wanting to offer comfort. "Sheriff Bailey's going to make sure they leave town tonight. Victor won't give up," Willow whispered, wrapping her arms around herself. "He'll be back, with more men or different tactics. He always gets what he wants." "Not this time," Mason said with quiet certainty. "Not you." Looking into his steady blue eyes, Willow made her decision. "I'll sign the marriage papers," she said, "if your offer still stands." Relief and something more complex flashed across his face. "It does." He hesitated, then added gently, "You should know the sheriff guessed you were here. He deliberately avoided searching because he's seen men like Blackburn before. But he wants to speak with you himself, make sure you're here willingly." "I am," Willow said, surprised by how true it felt. "More willingly than I've been anywhere in a very long time." The next morning, Sheriff Bailey returned alone, his manner respectful but thorough as he questioned Willow about her relationship with Victor and her reasons for fleeing. She showed him the faded bruises, explained the escalating control and abuse, and answered his questions directly and honestly. "Well, Miss Hayes," he said finally, setting aside his coffee cup, "I believe you, and I think Mr. Walker's proposal offers the best protection under the law." He eyed Mason thoughtfully. "Though I suspect his interest isn't entirely about the law." Mason's ears reddened slightly, but he met the sheriff's gaze steadily. "My interest is in doing right by someone who needs help, Sheriff. Same as you," Bailey chuckled. "If you say so, son." He turned back to Willow. "Your fiancé and his hired men left on this morning's stage. I made it clear they weren't welcome to return without proper legal documentation regarding your status, which, once you're married to a local man in good standing, will be moot anyway." "You think he's truly gone?" Willow asked, hardly daring to hope. "For now," the sheriff answered honestly. "Men like that, with money and pride at stake, They don't give up easily, but being Mrs. Walker will give you legal protections that Miss Hayes doesn't have. 2 days later, in the Petersons' front parlor with Martha, Frank, Emmett, and Sheriff Bailey as witnesses, Willow became Mrs. Mason Walker in a brief civil ceremony performed by the town judge. She wore one of Martha's daughter's dresses, hastily altered to fit her slighter frame, and carried wildflowers Mason had gathered that morning. Not exactly the wedding most young ladies dream of, Martha whispered as she helped Willow with her hair before the ceremony. It's more honest than most, Willow replied, thinking of the elaborate wedding Victor had been planning, a spectacle designed to showcase his wealth rather than celebrate any genuine affection. The judge pronounced them husband and wife with little ceremony, and Mason's hand was warm and steady as he slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, his mother's. He'd explained earlier, preserved all these years in hope of a future he'd almost stopped believing in. When the judge instructed Mason to kiss his bride, he hesitated, his eyes questioning as they met hers. Willow gave a slight nod, and his lips brushed hers with gentle restraint, a kiss that honored the boundaries between them while sealing their contract before witnesses. The small gathering shared a modest wedding supper at the Petersons', and as dusk fell, Mason drove Willow home in his wagon home to what was now legally her house as well, though the reality of their arrangement remained uncertain. "I've prepared the bunkhouse for myself," Mason said as they arrived, helping her down from the wagon. "You'll have the house to yourself." Willow looked at him in surprise. "That's hardly necessary. The house has 2 bedrooms. Mason rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly awkward in a way she'd never seen from this confident man. "I thought, given the circumstances, you'd prefer your privacy," understanding dawned. "Mason, I'm not afraid of you," she said softly. "This may not be a conventional marriage, but we needn't live as complete strangers either. The house is your home. I won't displace you from it." Relief crossed his features. "If you're certain—" "I am," she smiled tentatively. "Besides, what would people think if they knew the new Mrs. Walker sent her husband to sleep in the bunkhouse on their wedding night?" His answering smile warmed her more than it should have. "We wouldn't want to start rumors." That night, lying in her separate bedroom listening to the unfamiliar sounds of another person moving about the house, Willow reflected on the strange turn her life had taken. A month ago, she'd been a virtual prisoner in Victor's Philadelphia mansion. Now she was a married woman on a Nevada ranch, her husband, a man who'd offered protection without demanding possession. It was, she decided, a trade she could live with, perhaps even happily. The following weeks established a new rhythm to life at the Walker Ranch. Mason and Emmett continued their daily work with the cattle and the land, while Willow transformed the bachelor household into something resembling a home. The neglected garden flourished under her care, providing fresh vegetables for their table. She scrubbed floors, hung curtains sewn from fabric Martha Peterson helped her select, and gradually added the small touches that turned a house into a home. Their relationship evolved cautiously, respectfully. Mason never presumed upon his rights as a husband, maintaining a careful distance that protected her sense of security while gradually building a foundation of trust between them. They shared meals, conversation, and increasingly, laughter, discovering in each other unexpected compatibility despite their different backgrounds. Willow found herself watching him when he wasn't aware, the confident way he handled horses, the gentleness he showed to a newborn calf, the quiet competence with which he managed the 1,000 daily tasks that ranch life demanded. He was a man comfortable in his own skin, unburdened by the need to dominate others that had driven Victor's every interaction. For his part, Mason seemed continually surprised by Willow's resilience and willingness to adapt to frontier life. When she appeared at breakfast one morning after successfully milking the cow herself, a task she'd insisted on learning despite his protests, that it wasn't necessary, the pride in his eyes warmed her in ways she hadn't expected. "You're full of surprises, Mrs. Walker," he said, accepting the pitcher of fresh milk from her hands. The name still startled her, sometimes a reminder of how quickly her life had changed. "Good surprises, I hope." His smile reached his eyes, crinkling the corners in a way she'd come to look forward to. "The best kind." Their marriage remained unconsummated, though Willow increasingly found herself wondering what it might be like to truly be Mason's wife in all ways. She caught him looking at her sometimes with an intensity that suggested his thoughts might be traveling similar paths, but he never pushed, never presumed. A month into their unusual arrangement, word came from town that made her blood run cold. Victor had returned, this time with legal papers challenging the validity of her marriage and demanding she be examined by a doctor to determine her mental competence. "He won't stop," Willow whispered, her hands shaking as Sheriff Bailey delivered the news. "He'll use every connection, every dollar he has." "The law's on your side now," the sheriff reminded her. "You're a married woman. His claims of prior engagement won't hold up without proof." "What proof does he need?" she asked bitterly. "Money buys witnesses. It buys doctors willing to declare women hysterical when it suits men's purposes." Mason, who had been silently listening, finally spoke. "Willow, if you want to leave, go somewhere he can't find you, I'll understand. I can give you money, help you get to California or even further." She stared at him in disbelief. "You do that? After everything you've risked for me already?" "Your safety and happiness are what matter," he said simply. "If that means leaving here, leaving me, then that's what we'll do." Something broke open inside Willow at his words, the selfless offer from a man who had already given her so much while asking nothing in return. In that moment, she realized what had been gradually growing between them was far more than gratitude or convenient arrangement. "No," she said firmly, straightening her shoulders. "I won't run anymore. This is my home now. You are my home." Her cheeks flushed at the admission, but she continued, "If Victor wants a fight, then for once in my life I'm going to stand and fight back." The pride in Mason's eyes made her heart swell. "Then we fight together." The next day they rode into town together, Willow's head held high as they made their way to the courthouse, where Judge Parker waited with Sheriff Bailey, the Petersons, and 3 other respectable townspeople who had agreed to testify to the legitimacy of their marriage. Victor was already there, his expensive Eastern suit looking out of place among the practical frontier attire of Lovelock citizens. His lawyer, a sharp-featured man with cold eyes, stood beside him with a stack of documents. Judge Parker, a no-nonsense man with 30 years' experience administering frontier justice, called the informal hearing to order. "I understand there's a dispute regarding the status of Mrs. Willow Walker, formerly Hayes," he began. "Mr. Blackburn claims a prior engagement and questions the lady's competence to enter into marriage with Mr. Walker." Victor's lawyer stepped forward, presenting documents with flourish. "Your Honor, we have evidence that Miss Hayes was formally engaged to my client, with announcements published in Philadelphia papers. We also have statements from her physician indicating a nervous condition that makes her judgment questionable." "I was never formally engaged to Mr. Blackburn," Willow stated clearly, her voice stronger than she'd expected. "No announcement was made with my consent." Victor's face darkened. "Willow, darling, you're confused again. Remember how the doctor explained these episodes?" "Mr. Blackburn," Judge Parker interrupted sharply, "you'll address the court. not the witness. Willow stood straighter, drawing strength from Mason's steady presence beside her. Your Honor, Mr. Blackburn kept me virtually prisoner in his home for months. When I refused his proposal, he began hurting me. She forced herself to continue, though her voice shook slightly. The only nervous condition I suffer from is the fear of a man who believes he owns me. Victor surged to his feet. She's lying. I never laid a hand on her except in affection. That's not what these suggest, Martha Peterson declared, stepping forward to hand the judge several sketches she'd made of Willow's bruises when they'd first met. A talented amateur artist, Martha had captured the distinctive finger mark shapes with disturbing accuracy. The judge examined the drawings, his expression growing grimmer. Mr. Blackburn, these are serious implications. Fabrications, Victor's lawyer interjected smoothly. Made after the fact to justify Miss Hayes' irrational flight. We have testimonials from respectable Philadelphia society attesting to Mr. Blackburn's impeccable character. And we have witnesses to Mrs. Walker's character and the validity of her marriage, Sheriff Bailey countered. People who have observed the Walkers together daily, not Philadelphia socialites who have never set foot in Nevada. For the next hour, the impromptu trial continued, with Victor's expensive lawyer presenting polished arguments against the simpler but more authentic testimonies of Lovelock citizens. Through it all, Mason remained a steady presence at Willow's side, his hand occasionally covering hers in silent support. Finally, Judge Parker held up his hand for silence. I've heard enough. He turned to Victor, his weathered face stern. Mr. Blackburn, in my 30 years on the bench, I've learned to recognize the difference between legal maneuvering and simple truth. The lady is lawfully married to Mr. Walker. She has clearly stated her choice to remain with her husband. Unless you have actual evidence of coercion, not these vague medical claims, there's nothing more to discuss. Victor's face contorted with rage. This is outrageous. You're nothing but a backwater justice with no understanding of— Careful, sir, Judge Parker warned. Contempt of court is still a chargeable offense, even in our backwater jurisdiction. He shuffled his papers decisively. This matter is closed. Mrs. Walker is legally married and shows no signs of the incompetence you claim. I suggest you return east and seek a wife whose affections are freely given. The courtroom erupted in murmurs as Victor stormed out, his lawyer hurrying after him with apologies for his client's behavior. Willow stood frozen, hardly able to believe it was over, until Mason's arm slipped around her waist, anchoring her to the present. Let's go home, he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. Home. The word held new meaning now, not just a place of safety, but of belonging, of choice. The ride back to the ranch passed in companionable silence, both of them processing the day's events. The setting sun painted the sage-dotted landscape in gold and amber as they approached the house that was now truly theirs together. As Mason helped her down from the wagon, his hands lingering at her waist, Willow made a decision that had been forming in her heart for weeks. Mason, she said softly, looking up into his clear blue eyes. Thank you for standing by me today, for everything. No need for thanks between us, he replied, his voice rougher than usual. There's something else I want to say. She took a deep breath. This marriage began as protection, as a way to keep me safe, but it's become more to me. You've become more. His hands tightened slightly at her waist, his eyes never leaving hers. Willow, I don't want to be just your paper wife anymore, she continued, her heart pounding but her voice steady. If you feel anything similar— She didn't get to finish her sentence because Mason's lips were suddenly on hers, not the chaste, ceremonial kiss of their wedding, but something deeper, hungrier, yet still achingly gentle. His arms encircled her fully, drawing her against the solid warmth of his chest as one hand cradled the back of her head. When they finally parted, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "I've been falling in love with you since the day you stood in my garden, determined to make something grow in this harsh land," he confessed. "But I swore I'd never pressure you, never make you feel that being my wife in truth was the price for my protection." "It's not a price," she whispered, reaching up to trace the strong line of his jaw. "It's a gift I want to give freely. The way you gave me your name, your home, your protection without asking anything in return." That night, their marriage was consummated with tender reverence, Mason's hands and lips gentle as they explored territory previously forbidden. For Willow, it was a revelation desire untainted by fear, passion tempered with respect, pleasure freely given and received. In Mason's arms, she discovered what love between equals truly meant, so different from Victor's controlling possession that it seemed an entirely different act. "I love you," she whispered in the darkness afterward, curled against the solid warmth of his body. His arms tightened around her. "And I love you, Willow Walker. Have since the moment you emerged from that storeroom with your chin held high, despite everything." Life on the Walker Ranch settled into a new rhythm after that night, the rhythm of a true marriage, built on mutual respect, shared labor, and growing love. Willow flourished in her role as ranch wife, her Eastern refinement blending with newfound frontier skills to create a home that balanced comfort with practicality. Mason, for his part, seemed to walk taller, smile more readily, finding in partnership a joy that had been missing from his solitary life. 2 months later, a telegram arrived from Philadelphia that made Willow's hands tremble as she read it. Victor Blackburn had been killed in a duel over a gambling debt, his fortune largely depleted by bad investments and expensive litigation. "Are you all right?" Mason asked, finding her staring at the yellow paper. "Yes," she said, surprised to discover it was true. "I feel free, truly free for the first time." She looked up at her husband, this man who had offered safety without chains. "Though I've been free since the day I met you, haven't I?" He gathered her into his arms, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "We found freedom together, Willow, and we'll keep building on it day by day." A year later, as spring painted the Nevada landscape with wildflowers, Willow gave birth to their first child, a son they named Samuel, after Mason's father. Holding her child in one arm and her husband's hand with the other, Willow reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had fled west seeking only escape, never imagining she would find a home, a love, and a family stronger than any she had dared dream possible. The bruises Victor had left on her body and spirit had faded, replaced by the gentle touches of a man who saw her strength as something to admire rather than subdue. "What are you thinking about?" Mason asked, his thumb caressing the back of her hand as they watched their newborn son sleep. Willow smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "About promises kept. The day we met, you said no one would touch me without my permission. You've honored that in ways Victor could never understand." Mason's arm tightened around her. "Some men never learn the difference between possessing and loving." "Their loss," Willow murmured, turning her face up for his kiss. "And our gain." Outside their window, the wild Nevada landscape stretched toward the horizon, untamed, challenging, beautiful in its harsh honesty. Like the love they had built together, it demanded everything and promised nothing except the freedom to become their truest selves. For Willow Hayes Walker, who had once fled in terror from a gilded cage, that freedom was the greatest gift of all. In the years that followed, the Walker Ranch prospered, expanding as Mason's careful management and Willow's practical Eastern business sense combined to create one of the most successful operations in the territory. They added to their family a daughter, Elizabeth, joined her brother 2 years later, followed by twins Robert and William 3 years after that. Lovelock grew alongside them, transitioning from frontier outpost to proper town as the railroad expanded westward. Willow, drawing on her education and experience, helped establish the town's first proper school, teaching herself until a professional school teacher could be hired. Mason served on the town council, his straightforward honesty earning him respect throughout the county. On their 10th wedding anniversary, as they sat on the porch of their expanded ranch house watching their children play in the yard, Willow reflected on how completely her life had transformed. "What would you say to her?" Mason asked, seeming to read her thoughts as he often did. "To who?" "That frightened woman who ran into Mrs. Peterson's store a decade ago. If you could speak to her, what would you tell her?" Willow considered the question, watching her eldest son teaching his younger sister how to throw a lasso while the twins, not yet 4, attempted to copy their siblings with pieces of rope too big for their small hands. "I'd tell her that running away was only the first brave thing she would do," Willow answered finally. "That the courage it took to flee would grow into the courage to build something new, to love again, to trust again." Mason's hand found hers, his touch still sending warmth through her after all these years. She was always stronger than she knew. "Thanks to a cowboy who stood guard and said no one touches you," Willow replied, leaning her head against his shoulder. And then showed her what it meant to be touched with love instead of possession. As the sun set over the Nevada landscape, they both now called home, painting the sky in colors no eastern sunset could match. Willow Walker said a silent prayer of gratitude for fear that had driven her west and the love that had given her the courage to stay.